We're doing our usual delving at this time of day now here on France 24, delving through the French newspapers. And most of them, Florence, good morning to you, headlining on Newsweek's exclusive interview that we were telling you about yesterday, in fact, with the chambermaid Dominique Strauss-Kahn.
Absolutely. We're going to start by looking at the tabloid François that says, this is the chambermaid. Now, as you just said, Nafissatou Diallo broke her silence with Newsweek, giving them an exclusive interview, giving her account of what happened. Now, it's the first time that she's spoken to the press publicly, and she stands firmly behind her accusations, and she says that she wants to see Dominique Strauss-Kahn go to jail. Now, she's also on the cover of Le Parisien. Here she is, Nafissatou Diallo, her face, her voice, her version. It's interesting to note, though, that this is not the first time that the French press has revealed her identity. In fact, pretty much since the scandal broke out, they've been referring to her by her real name, which is a very different
cultural background, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, she's also in Libération. Here she is, ces mots, her words. And now, according to Libération, the prosecution is under pressure, and it says that this interview is kind of a media ploy to dissuade the prosecutor, Cyrus Vance Jr., from dropping the case. The next hearing is scheduled for August 1st. Now, according to Libération, Miss Diallo could be playing her last cards here. It emerged in early July that she'd been lying to investigators since the very beginning. Now, according to Dominique Strauss-Kahn's legal team, all this is an unseemly circus to inflame public opinion. Miss Diallo, however, insists that she's just trying to set the story straight. She says that people have been calling her a prostitute ever since this scandal broke out. Now, it's interesting to note that her lawyer, Kenneth Thomas, has made it clear that he's considering filing a civil lawsuit against Dominique Strauss-Kahn, and this could be him just laying out the groundwork for that.
And some of the newspapers, particularly left-wing Libération, have been quite critical, aren't they, of this kind of media war that's now erupting over it?
Absolutely. Now, their editorial is called malaise, so unease. And they come back on, exactly what you're saying, this media war. They come back on the initial pictures of Dominique Strauss-Kahn handcuffed. Now, that's very contrary to what happens here in France when you're dealing with cases like this. You never see people in handcuffs being led out by the police. And then they come back on what this latest interview, and they're calling it a TV saga, a TV episode, and they say that it seems to show how Miss Diallo and her legal team are desperate, and it says that all this comes down to her word against his, and they find it uncomfortable that this whole case is playing out as much in the press as it is in the courtrum.
Okay, well, moving on, the French press, of course, still covering the tragic events in Norway, and also taking that on a little bit, looking at what it means for the rest of the Europe.
Absolutely. Now, this is an article in Le Figaro, and they say that the extreme rights militants are under close watch. Now, in its last report, which was published last spring, Europol, which is the EU's police force, said that the biggest threat facing Europe is radical Islamism. But it did note that extreme right militants had carried out several attacks in recent years, and the police had been intervening with regards to those cases in Hungary, France, Great Britain, the Czech Republic, and Germany. And now Europol did note that while police forces may have been distracted by Al-Qaeda and therefore minimizing these extreme right militants. And it notes that often these extreme right militants are pretty much lone wolves, just like the Anders Breivik case in Norway, but that they're very active online and that they organize themselves into these kind of networks. And so they're looking more into that.
Okay, controversial one for you now. The French government making good on its pledge to reduce legal immigration.
Absolutely. Now, this is an article in Le Parisien, which comes back on the French Interior Minister Claude Guéant. Back in May, he said that France didn't need to have foreign waiters or builders, and he'd promised to reduce the number of work-related legal immigrants by 20,000 people this year. Now, it seems like he's making good on this, and he's put forward a proposal, which Le Parisien has on its website. You can read all the details of that. And basically, it means that they're going to reduce the number of job sectors that non-EU citizens can apply to. Now, according to Le Parisien, the two sectors that are the most concerned are information technology and construction jobs.
All right, Florence Romano there with the French newspaper. She'll be back with the international ones a little bit later on. Stay with us.
Hello and welcome to the interview on France 24. Joining us is the outgoing Under-Secretary General for Peacekeeping, Alain Leroy. Alain Leroy, thank you so much for joining us. Just 3 years in the job, it's a really great job too. You're in the middle of all the world's crises, you get to problem solve. And when we hear that someone wants to move back and spend more time with their family, as a journalist, our ears prick up. But are you just exhausted? Has it been too much? Or do you think it's just time to quit while you're ahead?
I just want to know, all my predecessors, except one, have done 3 years or less. It's a very, very intense and demanding job. And when you have a family, it's particularly demanding. But it has been an extraordinary experience during these 3 years. And from the started with the Congo in November 2008. Congo crisis was at the height. When, as I said, when the big city of Goma and this was going to fall, that was a big event. I had to go there immediately, and finally the situation has improved, but it was a big crisis at that time. When we had the earthquake of Haiti, you can imagine the crisis it was, when more than 100 of our people died. Our peacekeepers died in the earthquake, and something like 200,000 Haitians died at a time when the country was moving on in the right direction, thanks to our help. The crisis in the Sudan has been an ongoing crisis in the Sudan, in Darfur, in the North-South relation. And in Ivory Coast, but there are many other cases. So there have been, it's difficult to a single one crisis. There have been plenty of them, but that's our task. We are always we are in 15 countries, we have 15 peacekeeping operations, 120,000 peacekeepers, and always in country where there's a crisis.
You have been congratulated for the fast response, for example, in Haiti, despite the fatalities of UN staff and the chaos that follows a natural disaster. You've also been praised for your swift intervention in Goma, where a lot of people really thought that Congo wouldn't flare up again. It was almost becoming forgotten. But then there was Côte d'Ivoire, and there was a lot of anger amongst some African leaders about a potential overinterpretation of the mandate by peacekeepers to protect civilians. Even some were calling them war makers, not peacekeepers. How would you respond to that now the crisis is subdued?
I think there were in the crisis in Côte d'Ivoire, there were two phases. The first one is before the adoption of the resolution in 1975, where they had a mandate to protect civilians. But at the same time, we wanted to give the maximum chance to the political negotiation, and the AU was in the lead of that, the African Union, and they were trying by all means to find a political solution for President Gbagbo to understand the result, to accept the result of the elections. Those results, this phase lasted 3 to 4 months. But after 4 months, the Security Council decided it was time to be a bit more, I would say, more robust. And they adopted a resolution unanimously, but this resolution was very robust. There was a famous paragraph 6 in this resolution 1975, who said very clearly that unanimously, the Security Council mandated us to target, to prevent the use of heavy weapons against the civilian population.
Which means you could take out heavy weapons. So in a way, peacekeepers are always thought of patrolling streets and making sure things are okay, which is what you were doing, obviously, up until the crisis. But are you comfortable with that very robust peacekeeping, where you actually can go and take out another country's weapons? Is that something that should be reserved for very special cases?
Of course, very special cases, but for that it's very important to have the full backing of the Security Council. It was so important that this resolution was adopted unanimously by the Council. This robust resolution, if it's only some members, it voted not some members of the Council, that would be difficult for us. But that was adopted unanimously. It was an extraordinary case, yes.
You don't always get unanimity, and certain areas, for example, in Sudan, there is some problems. There has been continuing problems. And did you find it frustrating, for example, where you see tens of thousands of people's lives at risk in Abyei, and you know that these resolutions take time, and the troops take time to deploy? Do you sometimes sit there and feel, come on, Security Council, we really need to act now?
Oh, definitely. In this job, you have a lot of frustration. You always want to deploy troops more rapidly. You will have to have the best troops in the world, the best equipment, the best helicopters, and we don't get that. We get very good troops, but we don't get the best equipment. We always lacking, for example, military helicopters, and I don't have any standby force. It's a frustration for all my predecessors. We all have dreamt having a standby force that we can call.
You'd like that. You would like that then, a standing army for the UN.
From the creation of the UN, everyone was dreaming of that, but that has never happened.
Do you think member states would accept that?
No, it's why I call it a dream.
I mean, the Russians and the Americans. I think the Permanent Five would all be united against it. Don't you think?
It's why I call it a dream. It will never happen. So it means that when we are called in a crisis, it takes some time for us, sometimes several months, to be able to generate the forces and to deploy them. That's a frustration, because while we take time to deploy, of course, civilians can be killed.
It is very frustrating at the moment, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because even though the Ethiopian troops were on their way and everything, it took a long time and a lot of lives were lost.
Yeah, a long time were lost, and now we are pushing very much. And the Ethiopians, I must say, I'm very grateful, because they still deploy very rapidly now, the Ethiopian troops, yes.
Do you think, in a way, and this is a more general question, that civilians put too much faith in what peacekeeping can do?
Yeah, I think the mandate that's given to us by the Security Council to protect civilians raise enormous expectation. When you say, with a single sentence, you have to protect the civilians under imminent threat. Fine, we always understand that. But how to protect, for example, in the Congo, 10 million people, just for the Kivus, with 18,000 peacekeepers. So it means 18 peacekeepers to protect 10,000 civilians. You are not realistically be able to protect every single civilian from every single risk. So that's a difficulty we are facing. It's why we criticize, because the expectations are so high, and the means we have cannot fit with the expectation. We do the maximum we can. I must say all our peacekeepers are extremely dedicated, but they cannot protect 100% of the civilians, as the police in New York, London or Paris is not able to protect 100% of the civilians of the population.
Do you think sometimes they're undermanned, peacekeeping forces? You get mandated...
Under-equipped, I would say, under-equipped.
Somewhere like Eastern Congo, couldn't they have done with another 30, 40,000? I mean, those villages are so separate. The communications are bad. Do you think, in a way, sometimes everyone goes for the least amount of troops, or what they think they might be able to get, rather than what you need?
No, just one or two examples of this to compare the size. The size of the Congo is 200 times more than the Kosovo. And in Kosovo, when NATO came into Kosovo, they came with 45,000 troops. And in the Congo, we have 18,000 troops, another size. Exactly. The east of the Congo, the Maniama and Western Province, are the size of Afghanistan. We have 18,000 troops. In Afghanistan, it's something like 150,000 troops. Just to, of course, it's not the same.
Do you think that reflects
Afghanistan is a much more complicated case. Just to say 80,000 troops in a huge terrain and a huge population, we are not able to protect every month from everything.
So do you think that, in a way, is a lack of international will, or knowing what's achievable, or what you can get? What do you think it is?
No, at least it's something. If we were not there, it's obvious that it's obvious when we leave a place, or when we are forced to leave a place. If we were not in the Congo, you can imagine how many people would be killed. Yes, if we had more, we could protect more, for sure. If we had more people and more equipment. But there is a limit that the international community is ready to accept, especially at the time of a huge financial crisis.
What are you frustrated that you haven't done in the last 3 years?
The frustration, you mean?
Yeah. What haven't you achieved? You must be leaving the UN thinking, oh, I wish I'd done that. I wish I'd done this.
I wish I would have convinced more the most developed countries to come more into peacekeeping with the best equipment, intelligence capacity, military helicopters.
What are we talking about, the Americans?
Yeah, the Americans, the European countries, for example. Yeah, for example, when we had in Haiti, the Japanese and the Korean coming with their engineers with the best capacities, that's very important. And it's also important for the burden sharing, not to count on always the same country who dedicate their soldiers to peacekeeping. It's a frustration. I've not been able to have more burden sharing among the participants in peacekeeping. So far, it's a bit divided. The West, America and the Europe are the main, and Japan are the main financing countries. They finance, the European countries finance more than 40% of our budget.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think they pay but don't want to put boots on the ground? Do you think it's a question of national sovereignty? Do you think it's a question of that they don't want people like what happened, for example, in the former Yugoslavia, where some of the Western troops were humiliated and it created headlines and political problems. What do you think it is?
Yeah, it's partly that. It was clearly still what I call the Bosnian trauma. When in '95 there was Srebrenica and such a failure of peacekeeping at that time. And at the same time, when last year we had also the huge tragedy of Rwanda, where the peacekeepers were not able to prevent the tragedy and the genocide there. So that's part explain why some European countries left peacekeeping at that time. But I think now that's one of our main objectives, to ensure that we don't go into this tragedy anymore. And you can see in the last 3 years we've never had such a huge tragedy. We have failure here or there. There's still civilians being killed that we are not able to protect, but never the tragedy of the order of magnitude that we had in the 90s. But also another factor is the fact that the most developed countries are overstretched in Afghanistan. So I'm looking forward to the progressive withdrawal from the troops from Afghanistan, and maybe then some of them, including all of them, including the US and all of them, could bring some of their troops with their best capacity into our peacekeeping operations.
That might be a little wishful thinking, considering the fatigue that countries have with deploying.
Yeah, but many countries told me that they will. So we'll see. We will see in the coming years.
Oh, that'll be interesting. So actually, you've actually had pledges from countries that are involved.
I wouldn't say pledges. I didn't say pledges, but strong interest. I didn't say pledges, but strong interest.
Well, that'll be interesting. We'll test that with your successor. Alain Leroy, thank you so much for joining us, and good luck in the future. I'm sure you'll be very missed here at UNHQ and around the world. That's it for the interview here on France 24. Stay tuned, the news is next.